Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's live stream. I'm possibly having someone joining me later on, but there is lots to discuss as ever. Just at the start there, I forgot to start the intro thing. I'm rusty after the holiday, so right, here we are. So where shall we start this evening? Well, what did I put in the title? Obviously, Kate Forbes announcing that she's going to stand down is as an MSP. It's quite big news. So we've got lots to say about that later on. I've commentated a lot about Kate Forbes' career, but this is a very interesting new development, and there's all sorts of ways that will be relevant to Scottish politics and also relevant to the Scottish Family Party as well. We've got the remarkable incident of Nigel Farage saying basically he's okay with men in women's prisons. I'll come on to that quite near the beginning. I'm just staggered that he's taken that line, and a few other issues as well. So let's bring on our slides. Right, before we get into the thick of the issues, just a bit of a looking back over the summer. There's a few pictures from Refuel, where we had our tent at the Refuel Christian Festival up in the northeast of Scotland. Neil, Karen and Danny. You can see Ewan and Morris there in the lower picture as well. There's our tent. We spoke to lots and lots of people over the 4 days of the festival. Very warm reaction. Some people are existing supporters, people who voted for us, some people who were very unaware of us. So, but they were very pleased to hear about what we're doing. So, a very positive week there. There is Phil Reynolds, one of our men from up in the northeast, speaking at our little conference we had on Wednesday afternoon. That's me at the top speaking, obviously. You and Morris speaking at the bottom there with the front couple of rows of the audience at our conference. The building in the background, that's Gordon Castle, the event's held at Gordon Castle Estate. So, yeah, thanks to everyone who helps with that. It's very successful, very worthwhile, and very enjoyable as well. Now, you might have seen this video I made. Did I make it last week? So my wife did a pro-life tent at the Refuel Festival as well, and she had these sort of baby models. So they're models of fetuses at different stages of gestation. I made a little video with them at the Parliament, basically saying that I'm here to help you to decide when you think abortion time limits should be, looking at the different size of fetus, the different stages of gestation. So if you haven't seen that video, do look that out. And what else has been going on? Right, it's just a quick story to mention before we get to the biggies. This was interesting. Trans neo-Nazi teen who plotted Columbine-inspired attack on school sentenced to 6 years in jail in Scotland. Right, we've got a picture of her here. So a girl pretending to be a boy, thinking she's a boy, or whatever. Now, what do I want to say about this story? A couple of things, really. One thing is that there is a fairly steady stream of stories, generally people who are getting caught or exposed through their online searches or whatever, and which you could genuinely call like far-right terrorism. Now, sometimes the common thing now is, far-right doesn't mean anything. Everyone gets called far-right. No point saying far-right. Far-right's meaningless, which is true to a degree. The term gets ridiculously overused, but we're going to face it. It is real that there is actually like extreme right-wing terrorism or ideology is around in Britain, and people do get sucked into it. And I would say it's not that unusual to read an article about someone who's been convicted for plotting who knows what atrocity on the basis of particularly the sort of online extreme right-wing ideology. So I think it's really important that's something that we don't pretend doesn't exist, because it certainly does. And the other thing with this story that's interesting is the person being transgender. Now, transgenderism, what we're supposed to believe is it's normal, natural, and healthy. The actual truth about it is it's sort of a symptom of a psychological problem, and it often goes along with other psychological problems. And people who try to base their life, their identity, based on something that's not true, this is not a good life strategy. And it often leads to tensions and to dysfunction that can then lead to all sorts of other things. Now, was that a factor here? I mean, did this young person's transgender confusion, if you like, contribute to their search for extreme ideology? Who knows? Who knows? But it might have done. It's not impossible that that was a factor leading to this. Now, the defense lawyer in this case argued for a community-based sentence. She was actually sent to prison for 6 years, citing mental health struggles, asking the courts to consider that Winter is transgender. In other words, like just the very fact of being transgender is like an excuse. That's a mitigating factor for committing a crime. Now, if they really believe that, if they really believe that being transgender somehow makes you more prone to committing crimes, then let's just declare this openly, and then we can all know that. Or if that's not the case, then don't even think about bringing it up in a case like this. So yeah, that was quite concerning to read about that. Right. Although this is just another snippet as well, a little snippet from Scottish education. You often see headlines like this, and if you're involved in schools, you'll hear about this sort of cases, quite this sort of alleged research. Pipe bans linked to better exam results for pupils. Right. So this is if there's been a discovery that playing in a pipe band results in you getting better exam results. Now, linked to doesn't say one thing causes the other, but in education, these sort of subtleties are often lost. So this will be understood as, interpreted as, it's been shown that having a pipe band increases the exam results for the pupils. Therefore, get your son or daughter in a pipe band, then their exam grades will be better. Or if you're a head teacher, get a pipe band going in your school, and the exam results will be better. Right. Is that the case? Well, maybe to some degree, it probably is. But the underlying factor here is that pupils who volunteer to be in a pipe band, in other words, pupils who voluntarily enter into disciplined, productive activity on a long-term basis, are the pupils who get better exam results. Well, of course they are. Of course they are. The pupils are a bit lazy, can't be bothered, just sitting playing games on the phone or whatever. They're not going to work for the exams. They also probably can't be bothered with the pipe band either. And that's why the evidence seems to show that being in the pipe band leads to better exam results. But the way this would be interpreted is totally wrong. You could do any sort of structured, purposeful activity that could go on for young people. You would find it correlates positively with better exam results. But the reason is that good exam results and taking part in these productive, positive activities are both symptoms of basically being a well-motivated character. So the connection that they found is spurious. Now, having said that, is it good to have these sort of activities in schools? Absolutely. More the better. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's a pipe band or a wind band or a jazz band or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Orchestra makes no difference. But does it matter if it's music or something else? To a large degree, no. If there's some sort of other activity, if they're rehearsing for a play or involved in a sports team or something, probably equally positive as well. So absolutely have these activities in schools. They're extremely valuable for all sorts of reasons, developing positive qualities, but don't try and claim that they improve exam results. What would be most effective in schools is if you could encourage the pupils who are sort of slobbing around watching inane YouTube videos instead of doing any work, for example, if they could be encouraged, or in some cases forced, to take part in these activities and then start to appreciate them and get something out of it, then that could have a positive effect on their general demeanor, the general attitude to life, their level of motivation and industriousness, and that could have a positive effect on exam results. So more of these sort of activities, the better, and really encourage, if not force, pupils to take part in them in the hope that they're going to really enter into it, appreciate it, and want to continue with it. So I think we're probably, we're on to our, well, maybe we'll cover Nigel Farage first, shall we? But before we do that, I'm going to bring on this evening's guest who has now arrived. Welcome, Phil. I don't hear you. I still don't hear you. We're going to hear from Phil very shortly. Not just yet. We're not. Still can't hear anything. Right, Phil. I'll give you a couple of minutes to work on it. No, it's not me, is it? I'm not doing anything strange. Right, I'll give you a couple of minutes to work on that, Phil, and I'll leave you on screen, but I'm going to talk about the next thing.
When it comes to trans women in prisons,
Right, so this is from a Reform press conference just a day or two ago. I'm flabbergasted at this. At first, I thought, is this an AI fake? Surely this can't really be true, but it is. Listen to this.
Well, when it comes to trans women in prisons, you know, isn't it interesting that we run our country with people who become ministers, who generally have absolutely no idea of the subject matter that they're talking about? I've personally never worked in a prison, so I can't answer it. But I think you'll find that the answer that you'll get from somebody who has worked in prisons at the highest possible level is, I think, basically it's about risk assessment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we all know what the law is. I'm not going to go back over that yet again. But to my mind, everybody who is in prison deserves to be treated with humanity and decency. And that includes female prisoners and it includes trans prisoners. You know, everything in the prison service is risk assessed. And I am sure that the prison service will tie itself up in knots over the trans issue, just like many other public sectors have. And as Nigel said earlier, you know, we are at the beginning, and that is something that we will need to speak about clearly.
Yeah, but in terms of the problems in prisons, it's a relatively small one.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Tony Diver, Telegraph.
How about that then? Is that not just absolutely remarkable? I mean, we can look at this from different angles. The first angle I'd look at it from, just strategically for reform, just what a ridiculous own goal. Why ever would they do that? I mean, who could possibly be a potential reform voter, but they're going to be put off if reform don't say, oh, you can't have men in women's prisons after all? I mean, it's just, yeah, it's just self-harm. Utterly bizarre that he's saying this. I mean, at this rate, by the time we get to the 2029 election, reform are going to be virtually indistinguishable from the Conservatives who voted out at the last election. That's the way things are going. They're watering down and watering down and watering down. So here we've got some expert brought in saying, oh, it's about risk assessment or whatever. I mean, Nigel Farage normally talks, you know, the civil service blob. We've got to get rid of this groupthink. But then he's bringing this groupthink into advise reform and he's taking it on board. So what he's basically saying there is if a man wants to go into a woman's prison and live in a woman's prison, then they have to do a risk assessment and decide if it will be safe for that particular man in that particular women's prison. I mean, an alternative view would be you ask the women, and if they say no thanks, then that's the end of the story. But no, Nigel Farage says you don't do that. You do a risk assessment. We just say just absolutely not. There'll be no such thing as a Gender Recognition Act under the Family Party. And so there'll be no such thing officially as a transgender person. And so males will go in the male prison, females will go in the female, and that's the end of the story. Nothing else to discuss. But for reform to come out with this, I mean, the lady talks about public sector bodies getting themselves in a pickle over this issue. Well, reform are doing pretty well as well. But just what are they playing at? A couple of comments on this. Let's have a look. I'd be very surprised, knowing what we know of Anne Widdecombe, if this is not then a resigning matter for her, with that I myself would have to cancel my membership of the party. Right, what will Anne Widdecombe be making of Nigel Farage saying that? What will lots of other people, lots of reform members, make of that? I mean, particularly in Scotland, the fuss that there's been over that issue, the controversy that there's been over it, then for reform to take the side of the SNP. Remember the Isla Bryson case. Remember all that. I mean, it ended up with Nicola Sturgeon resigning. Nigel Farage is now coming in and saying, I'm on Nicola Sturgeon's side in this. I'm on Nicola Sturgeon's side. I mean, it's yeah. Words fail me. Words fail me. Right, Jack, what's Jack could say? In capitals, so I should say this a bit louder because it's in capitals. Farage says men in women's prisons is not party policy. right, I guess he's been backtracking because they've been totally embarrassed by the reaction to what they said earlier on. Now, I think if you backtrack on a policy because you realize it's gone down very, very badly, you've blundered, you've messed up, so you're trying to cover your tracks. If someone retracts it and say, oh, no, I didn't really mean that, no, that's not a policy, but what does that tell you about the people that you're dealing with? It tells you that they're not operating from principles, that they're just going with the flow, just following the tide of public opinion. Which again, is that what people think they're getting when they're voting reform? People will just go with whatever it seems like people are saying. So you just got to remember, in that conference, Nigel Farage knew what he was saying, and he said, now if he later retracts it, which is the truth? Does he really believe what he said in the press conference, or does he really believe what he said to get himself out of a hole afterwards? I'd be inclined to think he really believes what he says in the press conference, because that was less under pressure, if you like. But quite staggering that he said that. Right, Mr. Mellon, long time no see. Lefty activists will call me far right for simply wanting illegals to not rape our women. Yeah, the far right term is misapplied and thrown around ludicrously. I wouldn't say it's lost its meaning completely, but it is used far too liberally. Illegal immigration, family party policy is just it would stop. It would stop, right? How would we stop it? We're just talking about this with a family party activist this afternoon a little bit. We're saying, could there be mileage in saying, like, if a small boat is coming full of illegal immigrants, then how about having the law that you take the person driving the boat and they're just immediately imprisoned for a year? And people know, and then so you stop the boat, Royal Navy stop the boat and say, right, you're not coming past it. If you try and come past, the person steering this boat is going into prison for a year, and we're dragging the rest of you back, putting you back on the beach, bursting your boat, taking the deflated boat with us, and that's that. Now, the problem would be if someone say, oh, they forced me to steer the boat or whatever. But still, the idea of like dragging a boat back, putting the people back on the beach. Well, anyway, they're the sort of measures we need to look at. In terms of crimes committed by so-called asylum seekers, I mean, there might be some genuine asylum seekers, but virtually none. There might be some crimes committed by them. Yeah, genuine concern, and the statistics bear out the concerns, and people are quite right to be angry about that. The problem is that movement then often turns into something a bit unsavory, which makes it quite a difficult issue to talk about sometimes, because you attract allies, you should attract supporting comments that sometimes are quite extreme. Right, Phil, can we hear you?
I believe you should be able to hear me this time.
We can hear you loud
Good.
and clear. Excellent.
Good.
Excellent. Have we got any other comments? Yeah, Mr. Mellon. Yeah. Jack was saying that as well. It seems like Nigel Farage has been backing down a little bit, but he said it. He said it. Right? I mean, what do you believe? The person speaking freely, or the person having to back down because they're under pressure? But either way, I think it's a major calamity for reform to come out with that. Did you see it, Phil? Did you follow this story?
I was just sort of trying to close as many tabs as I could to get my sound back, so I missed the story.
Right. The story was Reform UK did a press conference today, and they spoke about basically women in men in women's prisons.
Yeah.
And Nigel Farage said it's a matter of risk assessment. They had some expert consultant from the prison service who was saying, saying it's not a big issue and it's a matter of risk assessment because everyone needs to be treated with dignity and respect.
Yeah.
And Nigel Farage said, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's a matter of risk assessment. And inevitably, so basically taking the side of Nicola Sturgeon on the controversy in Scotland. Nigel Farage has said, Nicola Sturgeon, I'm on your side. Isla Bryson, well, let's see. We'll maybe you can go to a women's prison after all. So, what are they thinking? Why would they say that? Can you offer any insight into reform or Nigel Farage's thinking in taking that line?
No, because I think it would alienate everyone that's voting for reform. in terms of, maybe we'll show some clips today of the protest that I I went along to, and that was, I picked up somebody asking questions about far right and things like that. So I was out in the meadows, somebody's handing out flyers against the far right kind of thing, saying the far right's coming to Edinburgh. I think it was either Reform or UKIP or something like that, so they were having this big protest against that. But then you look at what Reform's actually standing for, and it's basically the same as Nicola Sturgeon, on so many issues that people expected them to be strong on. They're now, pretty much doing what all the other parties do when they get into power.
Yeah, by the time we get to 2029, there'll be no difference with that. It's really, yeah.
And all the people they brought on to Reform as well, in terms of, I think it doesn't represent the base that they used to kind of get to where they are now.
Yeah. I always thought it was interesting with Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was detested by the the hard left. He was their hate figure, wasn't he? But Boris Johnson was pretty left wing himself. Net zero, LGBT rights. You name it. Massive immigration, and yet they absolutely hated him.
Yeah.
But it's been, I think, with maybe Farage thinking to himself, if I just need to get this extra 5% of support, so I need to be appealing to the centre ground. But with this trans thing, I don't think he is. I don't think there's anyone who was going to vote for reform. And who knows what reform will be in 20 years' time, the rate they're going. But I can't see how it's going to attract them any support at all, making that sort of statement. But anyway. Right, let's have a look. Reform is the only option. Right, now that is
no,
that's blasphemy. That is heresy. Yeah. To state that on the Scottish.
It's not an option if they do the same thing. It's not a change. It's just the same option.
Yeah. Anyway, so the better option is the Scottish Family Party in Scotland. Maybe D must be in England. So all this forgiven, you must be in England. But obviously, we're a better option here in Scotland. Right. Okay. Right. I think we're on to Kate Forbes now. Lots to say about Kate's announcement that she is standing down as an MSP at the end of this parliamentary term, which is early May next year. So, Phil, what are your thoughts? Are you surprised?
I'm just hearing this now, so
Okay.
So yeah, it's a bit of a surprise. I'm kind of interested. Any news about what she's going to do, or
no? But she says she's standing down for family reasons.
Yes.
She doesn't want to miss more of her young daughter's development.
Yeah.
Basically, feeling that she's missed the best part of 3 years, which will be going on 4 years by the time of the election. So she says she doesn't want any more. She wants to be at home with her family, which we would absolutely support. So I think that's a fine message from Kate on that front. Slightly strange that she's made the sort of comments that I guess you're supposed to make if you're in the SNP or in those sort of circles, and that the childcare in the Parliament's not good enough. You only get 3 hours a day of childcare, which apparently is because the Care Commission only let them do 3 hours a day. So she complained there's not enough childcare, but I mean, Kate lives in something like Dingwall, about 4 hours drive away from Edinburgh. So she'd be down in Edinburgh, I mean, for at least 3 days a week, if not more. Being a minister, you'd think probably more, maybe more like 5 days a week. So if Kate's got a very young daughter, I mean, childcare at the Scottish Parliament, how is that going to help? It's quite difficult to imagine how that makes any sense. I mean, is Kate thinking she's going to take her daughter with her to work for the whole week and then someone else be looking after? And it just didn't seem to make sense. So I wonder if Kate was saying basically what you're supposed to say if you're in the SNP and you're dealing with these issues. Because Kate would have been criticized, or maybe will be criticized by some people who will be saying, you're a sellout to feminism. You're a traitor to the cause because you put your family before your career. what sort of example is that to young girls? So there will be people who will be feeling. I haven't seen anyone say it, but there will be people who will be feeling that about Kate. Maybe she was trying to cover that off a little bit in what she was saying.
I mean, it is the typical politician thing to say, so it's quite hard if it actually is the genuine reason that you actually want to leave your role, because people are going to assume there's something else there, you know. But
I think it is
it's quite
a very significant part of a decision making.
Yeah, I can see like the job that she has is not going to give her much time with her child. But maybe there's something as well of the way being blocked forward for her, that she's risen as high as she can go within the party potentially. She maybe sees that, and that the way forward is potentially blocked by whatever political things are happening in the SNP.
I would think she could well have come to that conclusion as well. And I also think the personal toll of struggling within the SNP for so long. Now, she never talks about this. She was never going to stand down and say, I really can't take it anymore. There's so much pressure and tension between what I believe, what the SNP believes.
Yeah,
I've really had enough. I can't take it anymore. I'm stepping up. She was never going to say that. I believe it's true, but she was never going to say that, because she's. I mean, even when she's doing her resignation is not the way. Anyway, announcing that she was standing down, she had a yellow jacket on, whatever. Loyal to the SNP to the end. So I believe that's a significant part of why she's standing down, but she will never say that publicly.
And while she said, publicly that she'd support, transgender things, and she'd support abortion and all those kind of things, I think the abortion stuff has been moving forward while she's been deputy, but the transgender stuff and the conversion therapy hasn't moved forward while she's been deputy first minister. And so in some respects, it might worry me that those things might begin to move forward if somebody else who's quite different to her comes into that deputy role, which I'd imagine they would. And also, I guess at the election, there's going to be a bit of a wipeout for SNP. Do you think?
I think they won't
not total wipeout, but
they won't do as well. That's just in terms of those issues. I think the trans issue, the SNP just tactically realise it's a loser. They've had their fingers burnt and they want to leave it alone. That's what's happening there. Conversion therapy, I would suggest maybe Kate's had a bit of influence behind the scenes, but also it's the SNP's boring tactic. If Labour are going to do it, it's controversial. Let's just let Labour do it. So that's what's going on there. The abortion things. Now, if Kate had stayed on, she would have been facing a vote on abortion decriminalisation.
Yes.
And possibly one on conversion therapy. And assisted suicide would have been fine. She would have been could have voted against that. But abortion decriminalisation might have been a tricky one for her. And maybe that would have been a conscience, maybe it would have been a conscience red line for her. But I think the constant tension would have been a significant factor. To effect on the next election, I think it'll hit the SNP. And from our point of view, I think it helps us. Kate Forbes standing down helps us. I mean, John Mason as well.
John Mason's gone.
Yep.
And without Kate Forbes, is there anyone else who's
well,
not
we've got pro-abortion Murdo Fraser.
Yeah.
Still in there. We've got, in terms of Christians, the Jeremy Balfour, who says very, 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 very little. So I think but in
the SNP, is there anyone left for sort of vaguely socially conservative people? No one to pin a hope on.
No. I mean, there was Lisa Cameron, but she was hounded out of the SNP.
Yeah.
So the whole get involved in the mainstream parties and make a difference narrative is evaporating before our eyes, I feel. So from our point of view, I think that's good. That's positive. Because Kate Forbes has always been the poster girl for involvement in mainstream parties. From a purely political point of view for us, that is it's a positive development. I've got lots of notes here. I'll go through them one at a time. I've talked about the tension. I think I've talked about this before. I've talked about I call it the Forbes effect. And we see it again. There have been lots of media reports about Kate Forbes, and virtually every media report talks about her saying that she wouldn't have voted for same-sex marriage, and the fact that she got flack for it, but she sort of stuck to her guns on it. So she bravely stood up for what she believed. That's like in virtually every report, it says that. But no reports anywhere say about that she said, conversion therapy is abhorrent, defends the right to abortion, homosexual relationships are not immoral. No one reports those things at all. But it's just the one case, same-sex marriage, where she did actually say what she really believed. That's what gets reported again and again. So it's understandable that people have got this idea that is the whole story with Kate Forbes, even though obviously it's not. I mean, I've had a lot of conversations with people where I've tried to say, okay, yes, great, Kate Forbes said this, but did you also know she said this? And the people, they just won't have it. They either won't believe it or just get angry, but they just will not countenance the possibility that it could be reasonable to offer any sort of criticism. It's quite concerning. Have you ever encountered that in conversations with people?
The subject of Kate Forbes hasn't come up much for me, probably as much as it has for you. So, yeah.
Yeah. And the other interesting thing as well, she was put on the spot a couple of years ago in the campaign with Humza Yousaf. And she explicitly said, she'd defend the right to abortion. So basically saying, abortion will not be, the abortion law won't change with me in charge. And yet people persist in attacking her as pro-life, as being anti-abortion. So it's a bit strange. She's tried to deny what I believe she really believes, but it doesn't work. People still assume, there were reports recently, they were still saying, her views on abortion were controversial. We think, well, but she didn't say anything controversial. She actually said the opposite. But so it's like trying to cover up what she believed. It didn't work. People still act as though she said something completely. I mean, she gets treated as though she sort of said the sort of things that we would say. It's been fascinating to see that. I mean, I guess it's partly because she hasn't gone out of her way to deny them, particularly. But it's, it was quite interesting seeing that. Now, the other interesting one there, I mean, Murdo Fraser was the same. He said he wouldn't, change abortion law. He was pro-choice, basically. And a big pro-life Christian campaigning group in Scotland has got Murdo Fraser as the keynote guest at their anniversary celebrations in a few weeks' time. It's like it doesn't register among a lot of people in Scotland. It doesn't register. If someone calls themselves a Christian, people maybe just assume that they believe the right things. And when they say completely the opposite of the right things, it doesn't seem to register with people. There seems to be no price to pay. And your status in the Christian world is undiminished. It's
I think in parties like the SNP, though, that any hesitation on abortion or any sort of anything other than accepting what the current status quo is viewed as being pro-life. And the same for Nigel Farage and things like that, that he's viewed as being trying to take away women's rights and these kind of things, even though his position is just like shift it down back to 22 weeks or something like that.
But I mean, Kate hasn't offered anything, though. She's just said, no. I wouldn't change the law.
Yeah. But I think they're angry at her because she wouldn't have an abortion. Maybe that's the.
Yeah. It's like never enough. Is it?
Yeah.
Another thing interesting, looking at some of the comments under newspaper reports on social media, is there's still a fair smattering of people who just come out with the angry, or basically religious people should keep out of politics. People shouldn't bring their religious beliefs into politics. We don't want people who believe in a fairy in the sky trying to. That I would say that's 15 years out of date, angry new atheism. It's still alive and kicking in the minds of a significant number of people out there who really, as soon as they just detect anything that they think's socially conservative with some sort of religious connotation.
I think that's a demographics thing, though. That if you've seen the report on kind of Britain's quiet revival and things like that, and it's basically the age group which is in power in companies and politics and all those kind of things is the age group which is, is least Christian at the moment. And then in those who are older, there's a move towards faith, and in those who are younger, there's a massive move towards faith as well. And then kind of 40s and 50s is people are still moving away, heading away from God, basically. Yeah. And every other generation is moving towards it.
Yeah. So you can see that for a party like the SNP, who wants very broad support, then their strategies will be thinking, right, these people are out there. And there's a few of them in the Scottish Parliament as well, I have to say. But yeah, it was interesting just to see that the venom coming out. Just is it not about any particular issue, just this like real mocking, sarcastic, offensive response to anything religious coming out. Interesting. Now, another interesting thing in some news reports is they tried to just paint Kate as the like anti-trans campaigner. She was with the feminists on the trans issue, which she sort of was, but in the mildest sense, she virtually said nothing. She deliberately didn't vote.
The vote and
it came up. So she's like done virtually nothing. But it's as though people want to claim her for their side, but then the people often don't want to be associated with the other things that she might believe. I mean, I think she does, but she says she doesn't. So that was interesting to see different groups. I think she's basically regarded as popular and competent. So people want her to be on their side. So some people were like the report in the Telegraph. One of the reports in the Telegraph was very much like that. Kate was on the side of the the trans exclusionary feminists, on J.K. Rowling's side. So that's great. That's the big thing that she did. It's like it's pretty slim evidence that was really the case. The thing I say with Kate as well, I think she'll have tried very hard behind the scenes to have conversations with all sorts of people to try and change government policy for the better, with probably limited success, but maybe with some success. So I'm sure that's gone on behind the scenes. But in terms of influencing public opinion, I don't think she'll have done that in the slightest, because when she was asked about things, instead of presenting a rationale, she was on the defensive, trying to sort of half deny it, cover it over, or whatever. I mean, so even with same-sex marriage, it was like, so she said, I would have voted against same-sex marriage, but from then on, she's on the defensive. So she's not saying, and this is why, let me explain it to you. And then people might think, oh, that makes sense. But instead she was, I would still think that, and we respect democracy or whatever. Same with lots of other areas as well. So she would be in retreat rather than putting forward a rationale for what she believes. So her strategy, I would say, was virtually 100% trying to influence behind the scenes and virtually 0% trying to persuade people of what she believes. Whereas we're very much, part of our mission is to use the political arena in the medium term or the longer term as a means to influence public opinion by laying out and explaining why we believe what we believe, and to give people the opportunity to understand and to agree, to follow the reasoning. Right, what else have we had? Let's try and read my writing. And another common thing with Kate Forbes, some people have criticised the SNP. Remember during the leadership campaign, Nicola Sturgeon turned on Kate. I mean John Swinney did as well. I mean, he's totally unprincipled. And some people took the line of, that's really bad of the SNP. The SNP should make room for Kate. It's really unfair to try to exclude someone or make them uncomfortable in the party just because you disagree with them. I just think that doesn't make sense. It's a political party. It's a political party. It's like the fellow who joined the Lib Dems and then found that they wouldn't let him be a candidate or something because he was pro-life. We think, well, but that's the Lib Dems' position. It's like joining the family party and saying, I'm a trans rights activist. I want children in school teaching that they can change gender from the age of 3. Can I be your candidate in the election? Well, the answer is no, you can't, because you don't agree with our philosophy. You don't agree with our policies. And every other party has got just as much right to do the same thing. So this idea, when Christians in particular sort of play the sympathy card, play the I'm being discriminated in this party card, ultimately, I think it doesn't work. You picked the wrong party, basically. Parties can choose to adopt whatever values they like. Have you heard those sort of lines from people?
Like what I tend to get more than anything is just disengagement, I think, with politics, you know, that and it's more the view that I guess Christians shouldn't really be a part of politics or something like that. It's very, you know, secular kind of thing to be involved in, and it's you know, all about self-promotion and these kind of things, you know, and and that politics and faith don't go together, basically. You know, that we should be influencing people on a personal level, and it would be wrong for, you know, like Christianity and power doesn't mix kind of thing. That kind of argument is potentially, not that people are explicitly making that, but it's maybe the sort of feel that I get. Not that people are necessarily trying to influence people that much on the personal level either. You know, it's my general experience. But yeah. I think there's something of today amongst Christians that sort of value orthodoxy of being quite self-focused in their thinking. So they're kind of thinking, I should try and avoid this sin. I should try and avoid this sin. But when it comes to the work that they've been called to do in both culture and in terms of sharing their faith, that there's not so much happening for a lot of people and things like that, you know. And so all those things of letting your light shine on the stand, the great things that Christians have done in the past in politics through, you know, getting rid of slavery and making it illegal and all of those sorts of things, have kind of fallen by the wayside. And I think the sad thing there is that we've handed politics over to, you know, people with very niche interests in gender, sexuality, all these kind of things, where that influence has become completely disproportional to the number of people that actually are, you know, sort of supporting those views, or they're the biggest issues on their, you know, agenda, you know. So
yeah. Right, James, if Kate thought she would change the system from within, then the proof is there that the system will attack and beat you down. I would say that there's a lot of truth in that. Yeah. Let's look at a quote here. This is interesting. Let's go to the next slide. Is it this one? This is one where she's complaining about the lack of childcare in the Parliament, which is, I think, is a bit of a red herring, really. But we absolutely applaud her decision. Right, this is from, I think, was this from The Spectator? I can't remember. She's a member of the Free Church of Scotland. As a result, many SNP members rejected her views on gay marriage. Okay, fair enough. Abortion. But again, you see, it's like just assuming something that somehow or other they know what the view is. Trans rights. And she was further criticised for saying that having children outside marriage was wrong. I think she didn't say that. However, she insisted she would have been haunted had she not answered questions about her religious beliefs. I find this quite difficult. And she's saying she would have been haunted. She would have been filled with remorse. But, I mean, that indicates to me that she must be filled with remorse, because on a lot of issues, she didn't answer the question, or she said the opposite of what she believes. So I find it quite strange that she's saying, no, basically, I just had to. I just had to speak of what I believe. I just had to say it. But a lot of the time she didn't.
I think at least the Free Church's stance on these issues is that they haven't changed their stance over time.
Oh, and so Free Church is great. That's really
so clear. Somebody saying they're a part of the Free Church, that you might assume that the reason they've chosen to be a part of the Free Church is that they hold the values that the Free Church holds.
Well, someone asked Kate
more so than other denominations, perhaps.
Kate was asked that in an interview. They said, why did you choose the Free Church of Scotland?
Yeah.
And she said, because it was the nearest one.
Yeah, okay.
And the interviewer said, oh, come off it. You didn't
Yeah.
just choose it because the nearest one. You choose it because you agree with them, because it aligns with what you believe. And she said, no, I always just go to the nearest church. It was the nearest church. Which again, do I believe? I don't believe it. I don't believe that that's how Forbes ended up in the Free Church of Scotland. But you can get it. I'm looking. Ian Blackford was a member of the Free Church of Scotland. I mean, he denied every Christian moral teaching going, and the Free Church actually issued a statement saying that was the case. I mean, you can say you're a Catholic, and Monica Lennon, I think, calls herself a Catholic. There'll be a few MSPs who call themselves Catholics who will not believe anything remotely similar to Catholic social teaching or moral teaching. But it's not assumed that you actually do as a Catholic. But I think people rightly sniffed out, they thought, actually, that we think that Kate Forbes, we think she really believes this stuff. And I think they were right. And that's why they were after her. It's interesting they're saying she was haunted. I think that indicates to me that I think she will still be haunted in her own mind. And I think the resolution to this story is still in the future, I think. Right, I've just got one or two. Oh, time is marching on. I mentioned that some people just will not brook any criticism of Kate Forbes. They'll get quite angry and whatever. But another thing to say with Kate Forbes, obviously, is she has and still supports the SNP, which, in my opinion, is wrong, is unconscionable because of their gravely immoral policies. And the idea that, she tried to be changing it behind the scenes. When it comes to election time, when it comes to the next election, Kate Forbes will be saying, vote for the SNP, which will introduce a conversion therapy ban, which will probably, in all likelihood, if they haven't already, decriminalize abortion, continue abortion on demand, basically, as it is now, continue the trans ideology, sex education, etc., etc., etc. Really grave issues, but Kate will be saying, vote for them. Right, I think that's basically my points. I mean, the final thing I say, just to wish her well. I don't know what she'll do next time. She'll be more free to speak. I would be surprised if we do hear her speaking much more freely on these issues. I think she'll be quite prominent on the UK Christian circuit, I would imagine, as she has been already. So it'll be interesting. Or maybe she'll recede into relative obscurity. I don't know. Time will tell. People are saying she might come back to politics in the future, in 10 or 15 years' time. We shall see. Someone suggested the possibility that this is sheer speculation. Perhaps she's pregnant as well, or planning to have more children. So who knows what might be in the future for her? But we wish her very well. Have we got any more comments to bring in? Right, that's interesting. I assume that means if she wants to join Reform, she sees the path. She wouldn't join Reform because she's very committed as a Scottish nationalist. And I think her politics are much more, she's centre-right at most, I would say. So I wouldn't see her going to Reform. She would fit in very well with the family party, but I don't really anticipate that either. Right, so Andy. Right, now I think I might have one more issue to look at. Let's have a look. Done that one. Phil, this is one that you sent to me.
Yes.
So take it away.
Yeah, so civil service interns must be working class, government says. I think this was a BBC article. And yeah, it just seems, that the assumption that I guess is that basically that they'll be left leaning if they're working class, and that will keep the civil service, having a certain kind of political view, basically.
Yeah. I wasn't thinking about it from that angle. Particularly, I think that's entirely true. But then the other angle as well is just it's unfair. It's discriminatory. So you've got some people who might be working very hard at university and they've got their eye on a job in the civil service and they're doing everything right, and they decide they want to get an internship. They're extremely committed to it, but the answer will be no, you got the wrong parents. That's just totally unfair. And that breeds pretty deep resentment in people. If you want an egalitarian society where people feel they're all part of the same, share a communal interest in the well-being of society, then you don't treat people like that. You don't make people feel that even before they were born, they were disadvantaged. There was a reason why they weren't going to get that. The internship, which probably leads to a job as well. They weren't going to get that sort of job opportunity. Now, they will claim that they're leveling up opportunities because some people, like wealthier young people, might have more connections, so might be more likely to get a civil service job. Well, basically, if that's the case, your system's rubbish. If your system is based on people being able to get internships through connections or whatever, then change the system, or change the way you give the internships. Make it so it doesn't rely on who you know, because there are probably some kids from middle class families who've got no advantage whatsoever in getting into the civil service. There might be some people who's your dad's the chief secretary. I don't know, got some very senior civil service role, and will get you in with an internship or whatever. But there'll be other people in middle class, even upper class, maybe children, who will have no advantage whatsoever, and they're being discriminated against there. And I think it will breed pretty deep resentment among people. I think a lot of young men are already fed up with this because they're realizing the dice are stacked, the deck's stacked against them when it comes to apply for courses and scholarships and grants, internships as well, even courses and jobs, and applying for promotion. The deck's stacked against them time and time again, and that's they're getting pretty annoyed about it, which is inevitably what's going to happen. It is absolutely inevitable.
And of course, you're writing off a lot of people who probably have a lot of skills.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll say the unsayable to finish. I will say the unsayable, because the assumption tends to be in sociological circles, which means like political circles or educational circles, is that any sort of ability is evenly distributed across income groups. But it's just not true. It's not true. Abilities are not evenly distributed across income groups. You will always find, with any sort of ability you want to measure, you will always find extremely talented people from every background, every income group background. You'll always find that, but you'll find them disproportionately in the higher income brackets. It's just the way it is. And the reason is very, very simple. If you imagine you started with a totally level playing field, then which people are going to tend to make most money? In general, the people who will tend to end up earning more money are going to tend to be the ones with greater abilities of the type that result in you earning more money, like intelligence and industriousness or whatever else. That's what tends to happen. Then the next generation, they'll pass on their genes, which influence their children to some degree. So the children of the most intelligent and industrious and talented in various ways will tend to be a bit more intelligent and industrious and talented as well. And so that's why it's not distributed evenly across income groups. So a lot of these arguments are based on the fact, only 20%, and so only 10% of our applicants are from the lowest 20% of the income scale, but maybe that's reflecting reality. Okay, now it's the sort of thing I'd rather not have to talk about. We're forced to talk about it because people are basing their arguments on the opposite, and it's very, very counterproductive. Now this is what's Andy got to say here. Asians now have a higher bar to access university in the States because of nonsense like this. Yes, because basically Asians are too clever. So they're taking too many university places. So universities made some quotas to keep them out. Now, if you're going to have quotas to get some groups in more places in universities, that's the flip side of the coin is you've got to have quotas to keep other groups out. That's the way it's effectively functioning. But I've heard of that. Yeah, apparently some independent schools as well. I think maybe in Australia, they've been looking at capping the number of students from like Singapore, etc. Because they're basically they were just going on merit, and they're filling up with these other students. Yeah, it's a tricky area. Right, is that the last slide? We've only got a couple of minutes. Oh, I've got one last thing. Oh, yeah, this is from a while ago, but I don't think I've mentioned this on a live stream. So the Scottish government is looking at moving the legal age to marry up to 18. Meanwhile, the age of consent to sex is basically 13. So that's quite a mismatch. So if you believe in what's been the traditional moral principle, more or less throughout human history, in that marriage is the proper context for sexual relationship, then the Scottish government is absolutely pulling in the opposite direction and saying, no, you can have sex at 13, but we're not going to allow you to marry until you're 18. Now, the arguments for moving marriage age up to 18 is basically to prevent arranged marriages or forced marriages, coercion, etc., which I maybe have some sympathy for. But if I had to take a stab at what the policy should be, I would suggest maybe if the marriage age is going to be 18, then the age of consent should be 18 as well. What do you think, Phil?
Potentially, I'm not sure what I'd think of like marriage at 16 and things like that, or it being illegal to have sex at 16 or something like that. I think biologically, historically, people would have been mature at that age, and so it's something of our society, that says not mature, because there's more education and all those kind of things that people go through. They go through university and these kind of things. So, equalize kind of makes sense to me. But I'm not sure the point at which you do that.
Yeah, I think 16, pardon me things, this arranged marriages and coerced marriages, etc., that does seem to be, to a large degree, an imported problem. That wasn't a problem inherent in sort of Scottish, British culture 50, 100 years ago. I don't think.
I just think of India with arranged marriages and how well they do with arranged marriages. So in terms of the statistics for divorce in India are so small, and so I think there's something of individualism in the West, where people often get married for very selfish reasons, and haven't worked out who is the good partner for them, kind of thing. Whereas, a parent who knows their child really well and knows somebody else really well can potentially, make a better choice than that person would make. So I think it's not necessarily that arranged marriages are bad, but it's those coerced kind of marriages where, because in India, my boss was Indian before, and he was, his mum invited him out to India to meet a girl. And he's like, I'm not interested really, And he was living in homosexual relationships at the time, so totally not interested in that. But she's my mum, so I'm going to go out. And he came back and he was besotted with this girl that his mum had introduced him to, And so it was this thing of I think the mum knowing the child better than the child knew himself, kind of thing.
I was worried there'd be. I mean, talking about arranged marriages, I said it wasn't really an issue in Britain. I guess among the gentry and royalty, it probably has, particularly with royalty, back in Victorian times.
It depends what you mean by arranged. If you mean coerced, basically, if it's a coerced marriage in which you have no say in, that doesn't sound good.
It's probably grey areas. If it's like okay, you're going to marry Prince Gustav of Saxe-Coburg because we want to strengthen our alliance with them. So you're going to get married when you're 16, and you will introduce that. I think a lot. So maybe, I mean, there's degrees of coercion, isn't there? There will be a lot of pressure put on in those cases. It'd be interesting to see how that affected the success or otherwise of the marriages that came along. But I think just forgetting the marriage thing for an age of consent at 18, I think there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, the question is, what happens to younger people who are having sex? They're going to be like thrown into prison, whatever. But in terms of a marker of a standard in society, I do think 16 is too young. So basically, this is.
I think it's like, when do you want people to reach maturity by? I think that people aren't reaching maturity at as early as they potentially have in the past. In terms of like the responsibility that there would be on somebody like from 13-year-old in other cultures and things, where they say that's where you become a man. I'm not saying you get married at 13, but I'd say in a culture where somebody, took on the responsibility of a man at 13. Perhaps by 16 they're ready to be married. I don't know.
Anyway, to be considered. Maybe we should consider a policy. We're having a policy review period with the family party in the autumn this year. So if you're a member or supporter, then you can be involved in that. Go to the website and sign up. This might be one of the areas we look at. Now,
I think I'd probably just not change 16, 18. It's probably where I'd be at the moment.
But would you make 16 for real though, instead of
have 16 for real, and okay,
I think that's my last slide. Let me check. It is. Right. Thank you very much, Phil. Now, at the end of the live stream, I will now find the outro video. I forgot to do the intro at the start, Phil. I just and then realised, hang on, I haven't done that. It's been a while since I've done the live stream. So thanks, Phil. Thanks, everyone, for watching. And we will see you next week. Thanks for your comments. And bye for now.
Have a good